Hey everybody, my name is Jakar Lewis, and I am the author of the Kids It Series Teas Math Edition, which is a workbook that I created in order to help you guys to be able to successfully master the math section. Oh God, I'm so tired. The math section of the TEAS test. What it does is it helps you guys to be able to evaluate what your strengths and your weaknesses are, and we kind of play out those to build up your skill set. So the book features over 1,400 practice questions, a diagnostic test, which most of you guys have seen, located in the file section. If you haven't checked it out, make sure you guys check it out. It also includes 2 full-length practice tests, and the topics have been clustered together in reference to how similar they are. So it helps you to be able to, what's the word? Oh, retain. Don't mind me saying it. To help you to be able to retain the content. So far what I've been doing is I've been going through each cluster, giving you guys examples of the topics that you guys are going to see on the test and what you could possibly be exposed to. And in doing these examples, what I do is I give you guys valuable information that is going to help you to be able to execute certain problems. And I go through examples directly from the book to give you an idea of how it's structured and how the different topics are going to be seen together. So for example, we are in the middle of cluster 3 at this moment, and there are 5 clusters altogether. And today we're going to talk about interpreting relevant information from tables, charts, and graphs. So these particular questions are super important because sometimes people get tons of graphs on the test, right? And a lot of people have problems because they don't know how to read graphs, they don't know how to take the proper information from the graphs, or they may not have mastered the proper sub skills to be able to execute questions with graphs. And there's so much that goes into answering it because it's a lot of small things that build on themselves. So of course, if you would be going through the book, at the point in which you get to the graphs, all of the sub skills that you need to be able to execute the problems are going to be there. So when you have questions with graphs that are reference to percentages, that's something that you mastered last cluster. When you have questions in reference to statistics in graphs, that's something that you mastered in the section prior to this. So it just goes to show that the organization of the book is definitely something that makes it a really, really, really strong asset for you guys to have. So of course, if anybody's interested, you can check out the instructions and the announcements under the picture that has the cover of the book, and then we can go ahead and get started. And before I get started, I definitely want to say this is definitely an amazing Thankful Thursday, because if you guys haven't seen the post so far, I have collectively over 3,000 views from all the videos I posted. We're at almost 500 members, and the book has been shipped to 4 different states. So of course, you know, last week when I started gaining momentum and I was getting really excited about the group, I definitely didn't know that it was going to spread so fast. But of course, you know, I guess when people really like things that you do, they tell other people who tell other people who tell other people. So I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who took the time to trust me enough to watch my videos and allow me to be able to help you to be able to reach your dreams. Thank you so much to everybody who did purchase the book, because I know I'm a complete stranger and you guys don't know me from a can of paint, so you were risking your own money not knowing if it was a scam. And I'm only saying I'm not a scammer, but I just know at this day and age you never really know what people are going to be doing. And just thank you guys so much for giving me the opportunity to be able to help you grow and glow, so one day you'll be able to return the favor and to help somebody else grow and glow. So again, if you guys know anybody who's prepping for this test, people who you guys go to school with, people who you guys encounter in different groups, make sure you recommend it, because of course my goal is to grow this following as large as I can to thousands of members, so I can help thousands of people reach their dreams and be able to do what they want to do. So of course, I'll check back and forth as I go through if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, and we'll go from there. So again, today's topic is interpreting relevant information from tables, charts, and graphs. So basically, you have to be able to look at a table, chart, or graph, and you have to be able to answer questions based on it. There are going to be some specific things that I'm going to focus on in this particular section that you could possibly see. Now, I will say that graphs and charts are definitely like the word problems, which means that there are so many different ways that they can present it to you. It's really kind of hard to pinpoint specific things to be able to focus on. So I picked the 4 things that I thought were the most important. But again, the only way that you can really master graphs with this test is to expose yourself to as many of those as possible. So that goes with doing your practice questions, that goes with doing your practice tests, and just putting yourself in a variety of situations so that you'll understand which type of scenarios with graphs give you the most problems. So is it issues with statistics? Is it tied to percentages? Is it tied to drawing valid conclusions? You know, is it tied to understanding which is is it tied to deciding which graph best illustrates a particular situation? And these are things that you have to be able to self-assess. And that's why I tell people, continuously assess yourself as you go, so you know specifically what you need to focus on, so it helps to guide your studying. So in this particular section, we're going to focus on 4 particular things that I think that you guys would encounter in terms of graphs, tables, and charts. How to identify the graph that best illustrates a scenario, how to calculate statistics given a graph, how to calculate percentages given a graph, and how to reach valid conclusions given a graph. So these are going to be 4 different things that we're going to look at, 4 different examples I'm going to give you guys. This is definitely a video that's going to require you guys to take some notes, because we're going to give you guys some really good tips, especially in reference to being able to describe the different types of graphs and understanding why they're important, what they're used for. So if you guys are given certain types of questions, you will know. All right, so first things first is we're going to talk about a bar graph. So bar graphs are pretty self-explanatory. Bar graphs are going to be used to compare data between different groups. So remember when I say it's used to compare data among different types of groups. And they're going to be used to make comparisons between different variables. And they also can be used to track changes over time. Okay? So visually, if I show you guys what a bar graph looks like, we just know that it's different little bars that talks about different things. So say if we try to label the graph, we can talk about types of pets, and then we can have number of pets. So again, we talk about a bar graph. We know a bar graph is going to be a graph that features bars because it looks exactly like what it says. And one thing we want to put in the back of our mind too is we're going to have to be able to make the distinction between a bar graph and a histogram, because there is a difference, okay? So again, a bar graph is going to be used to compare data between different groups. So in this particular example, I gave you a graph that talked about the types of pets that people have, and of course we're comparing the number of pets. So of course I can label it like cats, dogs, birds, snakes, I don't know, different things. So just know that when we talk about bar graphs are going to be used to be able to compare different groups or make comparisons between different variables, okay? And this is just right now I'm going through the visuals of the different types of graphs, okay? So a bar graph is something that you guys are definitely going to have to know about and know when to use it and when it's going to be important, okay? All right, so now we're going to segue into our second graph, which is going to be a histogram, which looks very similar to a bar graph, and people often get them confused. But the biggest difference between a histogram and a bar graph visually is going to be that histograms don't have any spaces between the bars. So that's going to be the biggest difference, is that you guys notice when we have bar graphs, there are gaps between the different variables that we are comparing. I just had a brain fart real quick. There are going to be gaps between the different variables. So that's going to be the biggest difference. So as you guys can see visually, now this takes us back to the statistics. Now remember when I gave you guys those notes about the shapes of the different distributions, like uniform and normal and skewed to the left and skewed to the right. Those are all histograms, okay? And histograms are going to be used to display the frequency of given variables. So when we say frequency is how often something occurs. So versus this axis, versus it focusing so much on comparing data, now we're comparing the actual frequency. So basically how often something occurs. So a good way to look at a histogram would basically be if we compare, I don't know, like how many, I know a good one. So a good histogram would be comparing how much time people spend on social media. Of course, like if we did a survey of like a random 20 people, right? And then this would display different frequencies. So these people might spend 5 hours on social media. These people might spend 7 hours on social media. These people might spend 6 hours on social media. And of course, in collecting that data, instead of comparing the different people that we got the information from, we're just comparing the frequency. How often are they doing these things? So this is what is going to be important for you guys in reference to understanding the histogram. Is comparing frequencies versus a bar graph, which actually compares the variables. Okay? And of course, anytime we're talking about things, I always encourage you guys to go to like places like Google and get you some good notes and find some good PowerPoints so that you develop a really good understanding of the topics, because that's always the goal, is for you to be able to gather all the information that you can and come up with something that's going to help stick to your mind. Okay? That's definitely going to be the most important thing. And again, if you're just tuning in, remember, the first part of this video is definitely going to be important in terms of notes, because what I'm doing is I'm describing the different types of graphs that you guys can see in your test and what is going to be important about these graphs and when's the best time to be able to use them. Oh, and speaking of, the best time to use a histogram is when you want to show the shape of a distribution, which I mentioned, and also to organize a large number of variables. So histograms are better if we have like a survey of like 100 people or 200 people. It's so much easier to be able to compare the frequencies of things when the groups are larger. Okay? All right, so our next graph is going to be a circle graph or a pie chart, which they're the same things, but I want to put both names so that you guys are going to be able to be aware. Of course, we know that generally pie charts are broken down into percentages, but sometimes they give you pie charts and they're broken down into actual numbers, so it kind of just depends. Alright, and generally circle graphs or pie charts are going to be used to show the percentages or proportional relationships. And it's always going to be used to compare part of the data to the whole. So basically, like if I do a survey of seniors, right, and we talk about seniors and their favorite types of music, when I create these circle graphs, what I'm doing is I'm comparing the different types of music that they like to the seniors as a whole. Okay, so anytime we talk about circle graphs, what it's doing is it's breaking data down into pieces, into groups based on whatever we're talking about. So in this case, we would have hip hop, we would have R&B, we would have rock, we would have country. And that is exactly what's being compared to the seniors as a whole, is the different types of music that they would like, okay? And again, circle graphs are used primarily to show percentages or proportional relationships, okay? All right, in our next graph, it's going to be a line graph. So, of course, you guys should be familiar with a line graph because it looks exactly like what it sounds like. It's a graph that has lines on it. Oh, gosh, I'm so not funny, but I think I'm funny. All right, so a line graph is used to show how values change. Primarily, line graphs are used to show changes over time. So I know that I mentioned that bar graphs can be used to track changes over time, which they can, but line graphs are better suited, okay? So that's something that's very important, that you guys have to remember, that line graphs are better suited for tracking changes over a certain period of time, okay? All right, and it says the most common type of data found on a line graph illustrates how some variables change over time, okay? Which of course you guys said. So normally line graphs are comparing different types of data and it tracks it over time. And that's exactly what you guys are gonna have to remember. I said it 5 times, I think, but I'm gonna say it again. So line graphs are used to track changes over time. Well, it's used to show how values change, but primarily it's how they change over time, okay? All right, and in our last graph, which is a graph that you guys have seen, and of course, if you have the book, then you'll know and love it by the time you get to this particular section, because you saw it when we talked about explaining the relationship between two variables. So if you guys remember, that type of graph was called a scatter plot, because I talked about that in my video, which is the graph that has all of the different dots on it. And scatter plots are going to be used to compare the relationship between two variables. So variables can have a positive relationship, of course, which is going upward from left to right. It can have a negative relationship if it was going downward from left to right. And it can have no relationship, of course, which would be no correlation. So scatter plots are going to be good when we're talking about relationships between different variables, okay? All right, so far we took a look at 5 graphs. We looked at our bar graphs, which are used to compare different variables. We looked at histograms, which are used to compare the frequencies of different variables. We looked at circle graphs, which are used to display percentages or proportional relationships. We also took a look at line graphs, which are used to show how values change primarily over time. And then we also looked at scattered plots, which determine the relationship between two variables. So those are 5 graphs that are super important for you guys. So make sure you guys are taking notes. You take it to the web and you go ahead and you get you some extra informational notes. You can retain them and you understand why they would be important. So if we look at a couple of our practice questions, the first one says, which type of graph, I so can't multitask. It says, which type of graph, and then I just try to do it again. Which type of graph would best illustrate the relationship between the number of hours spent studying and test scores? So if you're watching right now, let's look at the question one more time and look at our answer choices. So it says, which type of graph would best illustrate the relationship between the number of hours spent studying and test scores? Would it be a bar graph? Would it be a pie chart? Would it be a scatter plot? Or would it be a line graph? So based on what I told you when I defined and I described different graphs, which one of these situations which one of these graphs would best illustrate the situation? So which type of graph would best illustrate the relationship between the number of hours spent studying and test scores? Would it be a bar graph, pie chart, scatter plot, or line graph? Let me come over there and be nosy and see what you guys are thinking. All right, so based on the notes that I gave you guys, which type of graph do you guys think would best illustrate the situation when we try to determine the relationship between the number of hours spent studying and test scores? Which graph do you guys think would be best? Would it be a bar graph, a pie chart, a scatter plot, or a line graph? What's IG? I don't know. What does that mean, I guess? So one more time, which type of graph would best illustrate the relationship between the number of hours spent studying and test scores? Oh, you said D, line graph. All right, so if we go back to our notes, we have to remember that a line graph is used to track changes over time. So the question says, which type of graph would best illustrate the relationship between the number of hours spent studying and test scores? So our keyword there is relationship. So anytime we see the word relationship, that's a trigger. So you guys have to create that trigger in your mind. And that is actually going to be a scatter plot. So line graphs are good when we're tracking changes over time. And that's always going to be a keyword. So anytime they ask you a scenario and it's talking about changes over time, that's a line graph. Anytime they're asking about the relationship between two different things, that's going to be a scatter plot. Anytime they're talking about percentages of proportional relationships, that's going to be our pie chart. And anytime they're comparing different variables, that's going to be a bar graph, okay? And of course, this just comes with soaking in the notes and doing a lot of practice problems. Of course, I know that you purchased the book, right? So there are plenty of practice problems in here for you to be able to go through so that you can learn the patterns, learn the different keywords, and go from there. All right, so let's look at another one. We're just getting warmed up. All right, it says, which type of graph would best illustrate the results from a student poll broken down into percentages? So it says, which type of graph would best illustrate the results from a student poll broken down into percentages? Would it be a bar graph, a pie chart, a scatter plot, or a line graph? So one more time, which type of graph would best illustrate the results from a student poll broken down into percentages? Would it be a bar graph, a pie chart, a scatter plot, or a line graph? So based on those keywords I told you guys to look for, what do you guys think the particular answer would be? Oh, and you can kind of still see it a little bit. All right, so based on the question, which graph would best illustrate the results from a student poll broken down into percentages? What would the answer be? Would it be A, a bar graph, B, a pie chart, C, a scattered plot, or D, a line graph? What are you guys thinking? All right, so one more time. Which type of graph would best illustrate the results from a student poll broken down into percentages? Would it be A, a bar graph, B, a pie chart, C, a scattered plot, or D, a line graph? All right, so based on that particular scenario, the best graph would definitely be a pie chart because the key giveaway in that scenario was going to be the word percentages. So again, the question says, which type of graph would best illustrate the results from a student poll broken down into percentages? So of course, when I see the word percentages, that's going to be my trigger to let me know that the pie chart is going to be the best choice. All right. Oh Lord, why did I erase that? All right, so we'll go ahead and do one more, and then we'll get into some actual graphs. So one thing I will say about this particular section is that I won't be able to go as in depth because it's a lot harder to be more precise with the graphs and when I'm drawing them for you guys to be able to honestly to be able to visually see. But if you do purchase the book, I have tons of practice questions that are definitely very bright and black and white for you to be able to see. Okay. All right, so our next question says, which type of graph would best illustrate a child's growth in height from age 5 to age 15? So which type of graph would best illustrate a child's growth in height from age 5 to age 15? Would it be A, a bar graph, B, a pie chart, C, a scattered plot, or D, a line graph? All right, sorry you guys, I'm back. My phone was ringing per usual. But again, the question says, which type of graph would best illustrate a child's growth in height from age 5 to age 15? So would it be a bar graph? Would it be a pie chart? Would it be a scattered plot? Or would it be a line graph? Which graph would best illustrate this scenario? Come on, let me get some feedback. Let me know I'm not by myself. Even though I'm kind of, I just got a marker on my dress. All right, so let's get some feedback. Come on, we got to practice. You guys have to practice if you want to get better. So even if you get, it's okay if you guys get it wrong because then it helps me to better understand the type of mistakes you're going to make. So it says, which type of graph would best illustrate a child's growth in height from age 5 to age 15? All right, so we got bar graph as one of our answers. So bar graph could possibly be an answer, right? I definitely could use a bar graph to be able to track the growth in height from ages 5 to ages 15 because I could do the height at age 5, age 6, age 7. I can compare them, right? But the key word here is that we're illustrating growth over a certain period of time. And remember what I told you guys, when we're looking at growth over a certain period of time, the best type of graph is going to be a line graph because line graphs are going to illustrate visually. They're going to do a much better job of illustrating changes over time, okay? And again, I told you guys, with this particular type of question, it's just all in practice. The more you practice, the more you get accustomed to the different types of graphs, it's going to come like this, okay? So I'm not going to expect everybody to know as soon as I teach it, but I do know that these are the type of notes that you have to have. I should definitely add them to the cheat sheet so that people are aware of them, so that you know these are little things you kind of want to put in the back of your mind, okay? All right, so we just wrapped up our very first thing that you guys are going to have to know, and that's going to be understanding how to choose the graph that best illustrates a certain scenario. So we went through 3 different examples. I broke down to 5 different types of graphs that you are most likely to see on this test, and now we're going to segue into how to calculate statistics given a graph, table, chart, or graph. So if we look at our first example, so bear with me as I try try to draw my graph. All right, so let's say, for instance, they give us this bar graph, right? And of course, we're going to look at the title. Now, you guys have to make sure you read the title and different axes to understand. Let me label this properly before I get to talking. I'll make sure you guys are reading the titles and the axes of the graph so you understand what the graph is displaying, so you understand how to read it. That's the thing. Sometimes people get some tests and they focus on the graph but they don't understand what the graph is describing, which makes it really hard for them to be able to answer certain questions. So this graph is going to display athletic awards, and they wrote the awards down based on the different types of sports. And this axis, our y-axis, is going to display the number of awards that were given to each type of sport. Now, sometimes they may give you a graph, right? And the graph doesn't have any actual data values on it, right? You guys are going to have to be able to guesstimate to the best of your ability what these values represent. So here I just drew them as close to the numbers that we can see as possible. So that's easier for us to be able to guesstimate. But you guys are going to have to work on it, okay? So even if you take it so far as to use your pencil on the computer screen and compare where it is so you can have the proper guesstimate, okay? And it's just like when we did round and estimating in our very first video, okay? This is a sub-skill that's coming back. So you have to use your better judgment, okay? So here, okay, I know that this is really close to 15, but it went a little bit over, so we're just going to say that that is 16. And of course, we just guesstimating. This is a question I just made up. It's not the same numbers from the question in the practice, the book. All right, if I look here, this is really close to 5, so we're just going to say that's 5. If I look here, this is really close to 10, so we're going to say this is 10. And here, this is in between 5 and 0, so we're just going to say that this is 3. All right, so if they give us a question, it says, based on the graph, what is the average number of scholarships awarded? So when they give you guys graphs and word problems, right, you have to be able to pull out of that problem specifically what are they looking for, what skill do you have used to execute it, and you go ahead and get it done. So the question says, based on the graph, what is the average number of scholarships awarded? So when we talk about average is the same thing as our mean, and you would know that clearly. I mean, you would know that. I'm talking about clearly. You would know that, especially given the way that the book is organized, because that's a skill that would have been mastered prior to coming to your graphs. So that's what I mean when I say mastering your sub skills, because if you have a firm understanding of statistics and you understand that the mean is the same thing as the average, when you see this question, you're going to execute it just like you do when you have the mean. The only difference is that they're giving you a visual. We've already broken the numbers down, so now that I have my numbers, I'm going to do what I normally do. We know that in order to find the average or the mean of something, I'm going to add up all of my values, and I'm going to divide by the number of values that I have. So if I have 4 different values I'm comparing, I'm going to do 16 plus 5 plus 10 plus 3, and then I'm going to divide that by 4. So that's, as you guys can see, it's not a hard process. It's not skills that you guys already haven't acquired, but it's making sure that you guys are mastering them so that when they give it to you in different forms, whether it's a word problem, whether it's a graph, you're still going to get it. All right, so we do 16, 5, 10, and 3. Let me use this portable calculator. And I've been seeing a lot of questions about the calculator. So the calculator is actually embedded into the computer. They're not going to give you a physical calculator, but I still like for you guys to use this as you're practicing so you can get familiar with the buttons. That's the most important thing to me. All right, so we're doing 16 plus 5 plus 10 plus 3, and that gave us 34. And if we do 34 divided by 4, that's going to give us 8.5. So there was an average of 8.5 scholarships awarded. Okay, and that would be the end of our problem. So again, if we take it from the top, they gave us a graph, and the question said, based on the graph, what is the average number of scholarships awarded? So your trigger should have been the word average, because we know that the average is the same thing as the mean, which means I would have to add all my values together and divide by the number of values. Well, first things first is we had to label the graph and say what the values were, because sometimes they won't give it to you, okay? Once we have our values, we do our setup, complete our computation. Always use your calculator so that you don't make any computational errors. And I will keep saying that because under testing conditions, you guys are going to be more likely to make a mistake, okay? So I want to make sure that you guys are utilizing the tools that they give you so that you're least likely to make a mistake. So in the end, we got 8.5. All right. So do we have any questions about that before we move on? And again, this is going to be using statistics to be able to evaluate the information in graphs. And it can be so many ways that they could ask you guys the different questions. Like, it's so crazy. It's really crazy how many different situations they can put you guys in. Alrighty, so let's use the same graph again. I don't know why I erased it, moving too fast. So we'll use the same type of graph, but I ask you guys a different question. Dang, I don't even remember the numbers. Moving so fast. I just know 8.5. One second as I redraw the graph that I kindly deleted. Moving so fast. Deleted, erased. Moving so fast. Alright, so if we have this particular graph, and it's a little bit different from the first one because I don't remember the numbers, but if we have this bar graph and it illustrated athletic awards, the number of awards that were given based on the different sports, okay? So normally when they give you a graph, you might have to guesstimate the actual values because sometimes they may not give it to you. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Alright, so if we had a question based on this graph and it says, based on the graph, what percentage of the scholarships awarded were given to baseball players? So I know one thing I'm going to need to know how many baseball players were awarded, so we know that it was 5. And they want to know what percentage of the players were awarded. So that lets me know if I need to find a percentage of the players, first and foremost, I need to know how many players there are all together. So I would have to add all these up. So I know that there are 5 baseball players. And if I add them all together, 25, 30, 39, there are 39 total. Alright, so anytime they ask you guys the percentage of something, anytime I'm trying to find the percentage of a total, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take whatever I'm searching for, so in this case the number of baseball scholarships awarded, and I'm going to divide that by the total number of whatever we're talking about, okay? So anytime they ask you the percentage of something, you're going to take that value, in this case baseball, that's going to go on the top, and you're going to divide it by the total number of whatever we're talking about. In this case, that's going to be scholarships, and we're going to convert that to a percentage. So that goes back to our sub-skill of converting fractions to percentages. So we know our very first thing is going to be to convert that to a decimal, which means we're going to have to divide the top number by the bottom number. That's going to give us 0.128. And then I know to change a decimal to a percent, again, a sub-skill you guys have to master. So you see how things are coming back? That's going to give us 12.8%, because when I want to go from a decimal to a percentage, I move my decimal too close to the right. So this is where people tend to get overwhelmed, because if you notice in this particular question, we had to label our graph. 2, we had to understand exactly what they were asking us. You had to recognize that the baseball players are a piece of the whole, and they want to know what percentage that represents. In your mind, your trigger should have been create a fraction, because I know in order to get a percentage, I have to create some type of fraction based off these whole numbers that they're giving me. That's 1. 2, you would have to understand the key words, because they say what percentage of the players does that represent. You would have to know, I calculate my total, I pull out what we're talking about, I convert it to a decimal and then to a percent. So you see how it's so many steps. That's why the organization of your studying is so important, because say, for example, if you start with graphs and you haven't mastered a lot of the skills that we've talked about, you're going to feel like you can't do graphs. Graphs are impossible. So that's why I say organizing your studying is so key in your success, because if you don't understand how the different topics are interrelated, it's so hard for you to be able to progress, because as I've stated, and I will keep saying it, that you cannot practice in California one day, and then you practice in New York the next day, and then the next day you're back in Washington, and then you go down to Texas. Of course, I know those are regions, but if you see how I went all over the country, you cannot organize your studying like that, because it's going to be so much harder for you to be able to retain. And we always want to make sure that you make this process as easy as possible. All right. So I know this particular video, in terms of graphs, it's going to be tons of information. It's one of those things you're probably going to have to watch it a few times to catch all of the good deets. And of course, I'm always going to recommend that you guys do tons of practice, put yourself in a variety of different situations so that you can recognize which types of graphs are giving you problems, which type of questions related to graphs are giving you problems. Recognize those sub skills that you need to master, go backwards, and then come back and revisit, okay? All right, so let me make sure we don't have any questions before I move to our next example. Nope. Okay, no questions. All right, so I know it's a lot of information with this topic. This topic is always tons of information, but I'm making sure I'm giving you guys some really, really good gems that you guys are gonna need to be able to execute the problem, okay? I'm so tired. It's the end of the day, and I know it's really late. So even if you're just watching, just trying to follow through, make sure you go back and take some time when you're actually studying, so you can write the notes, you can do what you need to do, and you can master those certain skills. All right. So I only have, only one more. Oh, good. And then we'll be fine. Oh, it's not that bad then. All right. So while we're on here, and I'm drawing this graph real quick, the people who are watching, about how many hours are you guys spending a week studying, honestly though? If you could say right now today, how many hours have you spent since Sunday, and today is what, Thursday, studying, what would you say? How much time have you actually spent studying this week? So we can kind of get an idea of where everybody is, okay? So if you're watching right now, just drop in the comments exactly how many hours this week have you dedicated to studying, truly studying. So focusly, solely focusing on your T's, be it math, science, English, or reading. How much time have you guys devoted so far this week to studying? I want to see what you guys are doing. Excuse me. So again, if you're watching while I'm drawing this nice graph, let me know how many hours you guys have spent this week studying for the test. And it doesn't have to just be math, but in general, like including all the other sections, how much time have you devoted to prepping for your test? Honestly. All right, so let me check out some of these answers before we get into this good graph. So come on, you guys who are watching. How much time have you guys spent studying this week for the test, honestly, though? How much time can you truly say you've devoted to studying? So I have not been studying properly due to my daughter's school closing without notice. I've been trying to find a school to enroll her. Okay, so understandable. So I definitely know that things happen all the time. Like life happens, work happens, kids happen, husbands and boyfriends happen, like all types of things happen, right? So in the midst of that, try to find time like at nighttime to study. Even if you just take an hour, block off an hour, block off 45 minutes and just study. Focus on something you need to get better at. Because I always tell everybody that your studying is always going to revolve around what's going on in your life, when your application deadline is, when you plan a test. It's so many factors that go into that. So that's why I tell people nobody's format is really better than the other, because everybody's life is so different. So just be able to recognize that if you know you're really busy during the day and you don't have downtime at nighttime, even if you're laying down and resting, take the time to study some flashcards. Take the time to pick a topic to focus on and get better at it. Do a couple practice questions, run through some of those digital flashcards just to keep your mind going. But I definitely recommend that you guys see something from this test every day. You should be taking some time every single day to do something to prep you for the test, okay? You guys shouldn't be spending any time away. It's no down days. Some days you may not study as much as others, but you should always take some time to devote to the test. Because if you do it in small chunks, as you progress, when it's time for you to really, really, really get dirty and really, really study, you're gonna have acquired so much information by then, it won't be as hard for you to be able to prep, okay? All right, so if we look at our graph, now we're working with a circle graph. So if we look at the title, it's student favorite subject area. We broke it down into 4 subject areas. We have science, history, reading, and math. And of course, this is broken down into percentages. Now, pie charts can also be broken down into whole numbers as well. Just depends on the situation. So the question says, if there were 200 students surveyed, how many chose math as their favorite subject? So we know this is broken down into percentages. The question says, if this whole graph included 200 students, how many exactly chose math as their favorite subject? So I know y'all like, everybody hate math. Well, I would be a part of the 18% that loves math, right? Anytime they ask you to find the percentage of something, and this is definitely going to be a sub skill again that should have been mastered prior to you doing graphs, especially if you have the book, you would know that anytime I do the percentage of a number, I just multiply every time. So if I'm trying to find 18% of 200, I'm going to know at this point that 18 has to be converted to a decimal, so that's 0.18 of is going to be converted to a multiplication sign. And then we're going to multiply that times 200. And again, I'm speaking as if you guys have mastered the sub skill. So that's what I need you to understand. If you're in the boat and this question completely throws you, that means you need to go back to practice your percentages, real world problems involving percentages before you delve into these, so it doesn't knock your confidence down. So again, the question says, if there were 200 students surveyed, how many chose math as their favorite subject? So I know that this is broken down into percentages. So if I wanted to find a percentage of a whole, which would be my 200, I know that I always have to convert my percentage to a decimal, and anytime I find a percentage of a whole, I'm multiplying. So I'm doing 0.18, which is my 18%, times 200, which is the total number of students who were surveyed. And I get this nice and annoying calculator. I can't use it with my nails. Times 200. And that's going to give me 36. So 36 students chose math as their favorite subject. So again, with tables, charts, and graphs, it's so many ways. I probably should do one table too. There are so many different ways they can present information to you, but you guys have to have those sub skills mastered so that you're able to execute these properly, okay? And these all come down to a matter of sub skills, knowing your statistics, knowing your percentages, knowing the graphs that illustrate the best scenarios. Like, you have to know all of that to be able to execute these problems, because I know that people complain all the time about not understanding how to read graphs, and honestly, it's all connected to mastering those sub skills, okay? That is definitely going to be the most important thing. Alright, so I'll throw a table in here real quick, even though I'm real tired. Alright, so they gave you guys a table. So again, tables have to be treated just like our graphs. You have to be able to look at it and evaluate it based on what it's talking about. So when they ask you a question, you know what direction you're going in. So this is the table, and it says ATM Entertainment's revenue, and it's broken down into 4 sectors. It shows you how much revenue they made in terms of comedy, anything related to comedy, music, community, and sports. So from comedy, they raked in $25,000. From music, $100,000. From community, $15,000. And from sports, $30,000. Alright, so the question says, what percentage of ATM Entertainment's revenue do sports account for? So again, what percentage of their revenue do sports account for? So I know I need 2 things. I need to know what their total revenue is, and I need to know how much that revenue comes from sports. Well, I know that sports is $30,000. If I want to know how much revenue they had in general, I have to add them all up together. Anytime they ask me for the percentage of something, FYI, just to give you guys a little hint, anytime they ask me for the percentage of something and they're giving you values such as this, not in the pie chart form, you're always going to add up. You always have to have some type of total because that's going to be your denominator. Okay? Sure. If we add everything up, I know sports is $30,000, that's the top. 130 plus 40, 178,000. So when we add everything up, that was $170,000 total. If we do 30,000 divided by 170,000, that's going to give us 0.176. And of course, they ask us for percentages. We move it 2 places to the right, so it's going to be 17.6%. And again, if all of this is really hard for you, what that means is that you did not master real world problems involving percentages. So you need to go back and do that, so that when you roll over into your table chart graphs, it won't be as hard. So the question says originally, what percentage of ATM Entertainment's revenue do concerts account for? So anytime they ask me for the percentage of a value, especially with tables and graphs, we're not talking about circle graphs, you always have to find the total of what you're talking about, because that's where we're pulling from, okay? And you have to locate the specific thing they're asking. So we know specifically they're asking, how much do sports account for? I think that's what I said the last time, yeah. Sports account for. So I know, okay, sports account for $30,000. The total of their revenue is $170,000. If I want to convert this to a percentage, that's that sub skill again. I convert it to a decimal first by dividing the top by the bottom. They gave me 0.176. And then if I want to convert it to a percent, I move it 2 places to the right, which gives me 17.6%. So I know this video was super long. It was packed with tons of information. I know some of you guys looking at me like, what are you talking about, Jakara? But don't be alarmed. Basically, the gist of this video is to give you guys the bones of of tables, charts, and graphs. I wanted to show you guys specifically the main things that you guys should be able to. I got real serious then. The main things that you guys should be focusing on. And in this sense, it all reverts back to those sub skills. So as I say, these skills are going to build on each other. So if you didn't master something prior to a particular topic, it's going to be really hard for you to be able to execute it. So that's why I always going to recommend. Speaking of, I think I have one in here. Yeah. I'm always going to recommend the Kisses Series Teas Math edition, because what it does is it groups the topics into clusters. I grouped everything together based on how similar they are and what role they played in terms of sub skills. So as you progress through the book, as the questions get harder, as the topics get harder, when you get to certain points, you should already have the skills that you need to be able to execute. So that's why I know that in terms of graphs, some of you guys are going to watch the video and it's going to be a little difficult for you because you guys haven't mastered the proper sub skills. And if you are that person, there are plenty of videos that I have posted prior to this one, and it all follows the structure of the book. So somewhere in some of those videos, I've showed you those sub skills that you would need to answer those example problems that I gave you, okay? And I always recommend that you go back and you watch it and watch it and watch it, and you find practice problem after practice problem after practice problem. Get them from other people. Get them from different sources, because I want you guys to see that the bones that I give you here, the information that you get from me, translates to any other type of question created by anybody. The stuff that I show you guys does not only work for the things that I've created, it works in general with math. That's one thing that I love about math, is math does not change. It's the same. It's the same. It was the same 50 years ago. It's going to be the same 50 years from now. Now, the road to which you get to the answer may change sometimes, but everybody finds a process that works best for them. So I always feel like this, of course, is the best product. I'm not just saying that because I did it. I'm saying it because I've been through tons and tons and tons of products over the years, and I never found anything that I felt like was good enough. I never found anything that I felt like if I gave it to people who I tutored, they will be okay by themselves. I really, really feel like the way that this book is structured and the language that I use, you are highly likely to be successful by yourself with the book. You may have a question here and there, but overall, the language of it was written specifically for you to be able to do these things on your own, okay? And of course, me creating the videos to help give you a little boost, just to help you out every now and then if you're confused. So again, if you are curious about the book, about purchasing the book, go ahead and comment on my announcement with the title of the book, and we'll go ahead and get you one shipped out. You can get the book for $40, and it's going to be a $10 flat rate for shipping because of the weight of the book. It's more expensive for me to ship, especially if it's further away, so I do a flat rate. So it's cheaper for you guys, and the price doesn't fluctuate as much. If you missed my announcement 2 nights ago, what I'm going to be dropping July 15th is going to be a digital download of 5 full-length practice tests with explanations. That'll be available for $30. You guys cannot practice enough. Even though the book does include a diagnostic and 2 full-length practice tests, which is technically 3 full-length practice tests, I feel like you guys should put yourself in that situation over and over and over again, so you can evaluate, grow. Never ever be content with 1 score from 1 test, because because you do good on this test, you should be able to repeat that 5, 6, 7, 8 more times, okay? And if you see that it's up and it's down, that means that there are certain things that you haven't mastered, and that guides you back to your studying. So when I provide you guys certain tools, it's just to help to be able to strengthen those skills, because I know from being a math person, from being a math tutor, from being a math teacher, from creating this book, that you have to do it over and over and over again until you gain that confidence, until you master the content. So when you see it, when you get to your test, you know what you're doing. It's no second guessing. You understand it and you're able to execute it. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me so late at night tonight. I know it's late, but I really wanted to get this video to you guys because we only have one more video for cluster 3, which is calculating geometric quantities, and I've already done a mini review on geometry, so tomorrow should be really, really good for us, and then we can segue into our fourth cluster, which is fractions. And even though I posted 2 really great videos about fractions, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run it back from the top so I can give you guys all of my small tips and tricks. I can put you guys in all those really good scenarios and kind of see how far you guys have grown so far. Go ahead and check out my mini review in the morning. I don't know what topic I'm going to choose, but I'll pick something, probably statistics. Now drop those questions and you drop those answers so we can see where you guys are. And make sure you guys are studying, you stay focused, you remain resilient. And you know, sometimes you're gonna have good study days, sometimes you're gonna have bad study days, sometimes you may not be able to study at all, but just remember you take everything a day at a time. I don't always have great days, but I still keep pushing, okay? So thank you guys so much. Make sure you guys are getting some rest. Make sure you guys kind of get your routine together, get your calendar, let's get planning, and let's get these test passed so you guys can get to nursing school and become some really, really, really great nurses who are going to get back. Okay, thank you guys so much, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.